YouTube, this is White One Auto checking in again today. I made a previous video about things you don't want to see when your car is LS swapped. And one of the topics I touched on is that if you're using a Holley system and you put this on your car, I don't care if it's a Sniper on a carbureted engine, a Terminator X on an LS swap, or a Terminator Stealth carburetor on a 632 big block. What I said is that if you put the information in correctly, when you go to the startup wizard, the base calibrations from Holley are so good that the car should run, start, and idle. Now, this is a 1984 Chevrolet Monte Carlo. We LS swapped this car. We finished it up a couple months ago. And one of the items that the customer provided to us was an engine. The engine was not the greatest engine. So since we've got the swap done, the customer brought it back to us and said, hey, I want to put a brand new crate engine in the car. So that's what we did. So this is a Chevrolet Performance 6.0 crate engine, and it has the LS3 heads. You can see that casting number right now. Now, what I want you to remember is that this is a new engine. The original engine in here was an LS2 out of like a Trailblazer SS, and it was a Gen 4 LS architecture where it has your camshaft sensor mounted up front. And so this is a Gen 3. So because we already had this wiring harness, we opted to use an adapter harness with this Gen 3 style block where it relocates, because the cam sensor is in the rear of the block back here. So now we have an adapter harness that plugs into there, and then we can run cut, and then we can connect it into our cam sensor harness there. So when we first started this car up, it would not start. We ran through some checks and found out that the issue was our adapter harness. The wires were crossed in the adapter harness, so we recrossed them, plugged it back in, and it fired right up. This car has not been tuned. I started it up once this morning and I shut it off because I realized I wanted to make this video to prove something to you. You can see me, I am touching the header. The header is not that hot. It has a little warmth to it, but it is not hot. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I want you to realize that when I go to start this car up, this is a base tune from Holley. We just input the information from Holley, and we just selected the information that the computer asked us for on our little handheld, input it, and then, we used our laptop to do it. So I used my laptop to set it up, and I input the information, but I have not done any tuning on this thing. I have not done any tuning on it. So we're gonna go in here and turn the key and get it to start up. So we turn the key, we wait for our boot up screen to come up. After our gauge is displayed, then that's when I will try to start the car. See, we got a fuel pressure reading there. We have negative oil pressure. Our gauges aren't working right now because we're using a splitter, and we had to remove that splitter so we can do some, so we can update the firmware in our handheld and update the firmware in our PCM for the Terminator X. So we're gonna start it. So everyone, this is a Holley base tune. All we did is select the correct information. Our wiring is done correctly. We have adequate fuel pressure. There's nothing mechanically wrong with the engine. This thing will idle, run, and drive. Backing up right now, this thing isn't stalling out. This thing isn't bucking and hucking. I mean, it does need a lot of work in the tune, like you can watch our air fuse. See how we're going really, really lean there? So I wouldn't recommend that you beat on this thing like this. But this here, you can definitely get to your tuner. So if you're LS swapping your car and you install a Terminator X or a Terminator X Max or I will even say sniper if you have a carbureted engine. I would not recommend that you put a sniper, like fuel injected carburetor, on a LS swap while you're also using a separate component like another brand ignition box to control the timing. I have seen that done before. I would not recommend that though, but it can be done. Back to the original point. If you put a Terminator X, an X Max, a sniper on your small block or big block, a sniper stealth carburetor, fuel injected style stealth carburetor on your big block Chevrolet, if you run an LS swap with a single turbo, and I personally believe, and in my experience, and through people that I've also talked with who are better than I am doing this, the base calibrations that you are provided from Holley are enough to get the vehicle running, driving, starting to your tuner. So if you put one of these things on and the vehicle is not running, starting, or driving, you need to look over your installation. First things I would check is check your battery power and ground. Make sure they are running directly to the battery. Make sure you have a good battery. I would not recommend you starting one of these things with a battery charger attached. Also, a lot of people see like screen resets. A lot of times I think that comes from your 12-volt ignition wire that's supposed to key the system on, like when you're keying on your car. That may not have a good solid 12 volts going to it. You could have a bad ignition switch that cuts out at times. The wiring coming from your ignition switch is cutting out at times. All of those things can reduce that voltage. As well as I've seen on a car, they were picking up 12 volts from the ignition switch. It was a good solid 12 volts, but also it had some other aftermarket accessories in the vehicle that came on a little bit later after the vehicle ran and got up to temperature. So when those components kicked on, it reduced that voltage in that wire to below the 12 volts. And that's what was causing the screen resets. So another thing you want to take a look at is make sure where you're picking up 12 volts has 12 volts all of the time. And nothing else is required to use that same 12 volts that may make it drop a lot lower. The fuel system is a big thing. I know a lot of us want to save as much money as possible, but I'm a believer in building a fuel system as best as possible. You want to make sure your fuel system can supply adequate pressure and flow for the amount of horsepower that you intend to make. You need to make sure that when you set up in the Wizard, if you're running 60 PSI, that you're actually getting 60 PSI. You also want to check your return line pressure. It should be like 0 to 3 PSI. You also want to check flow, because just because you have pressure, it does not mean that you have flow. Check that as well. Simple things like spark plug wires. If you make your own spark plug wires, make sure the crimps are good, because during a high voltage demand on your ignition system, the spark could be shutting out, causing you a misfire. Make sure that if you relocate your coils and you're using a harness that was made by someone else or another company, make sure that harness is good. It has good connections, there's quality wiring, because you don't want to have a misfire situation due to I relocated my coil and the harness that I'm using is not a good quality harness. Simple things, doing simple things correctly greatly improves your reliability. I'm not saying that you're not able to get a bad part out of the box, but I've done over 20 of varying different types, snipers, all things down this fuel injection line for Holley, and I've never gotten a bad one out of the box. There have been some times where I put it on and thought maybe I had a bad one, but then after I walk through my installation, I see, oh, I didn't do this or I didn't do that, and then I fix it and the thing fires right up. I know the systems are self-learning. I personally would recommend that you take them to a professional tuner, because once your engine is in the car, it's running and driving, sometimes different engines like different things. Your engine may be happier running a little bit leaner or a little bit richer. The only way you're actually going to know if it's happy is there and if it's safe is there is you need to get to a professional tuner who knows what signs to look for and seeing though even though it's running a little bit leaner than you would like, it's not hurting the engine. Like they're reading spark plugs. They are able to tell that this engine is safe and happy here. Because in our minds, we always think, oh, every engine, if it's running at 12.5, it's perfect. But for whatever reason, you might have an engine that doesn't want to run at 12.5. It might want to run at 13.5, and it runs even better than at 12.5. And it's just as safe as well. So that's where a professional with someone with knowledge and experience can be able to handle it. So, and I think I misspoke earlier. The car, the Monte Carlo, isn't running lean. It is running a little too bit rich off of idle, according to the handheld. So once we get into actually tuning the car, we will figure out what is going on. Why are we seeing those readings? Remember, this car had an engine in it that had very low oil pressure, and the rings were starting to go bad. So you could possibly have an O2 sensor that is contaminated by oil that may need to be replaced. We're not 100% sure because we just started the thing up, and now we're actually going to get involved with the tuning process. So remember, everybody, take your time, buy quality components first, and you will have a much better swap. Another thing that I wanted to touch on is so that when I first got back inside the Monte Carlo after we had the engine in it and it wouldn't start because our jumper harness had two wires not on the correct pins for our application, I plugged in my laptop and it gave me a warning saying the firmware I was using on my software on my laptop was higher than the firmware of the software that was in the handheld and in the Terminator X computer. So I updated the firmware. I haven't done this in a little while. But one thing I want to let you know, although I have done it before and I feel confident, I went back and rewatched the Holley video that they had about updating firmware, just so I can be sure to do it correctly. You don't want to be so cocky when you're doing an installation that you feel you don't need to read instructions. You don't need to look at videos that are provided by the manufacturer of your product. You want to be very familiar with all of your instructions, and if they provide extra technical videos that show you how to do it, please watch them and follow them, because the manufacturers are only making these videos in response to warranty claims that they see. Like Melon has a video about lifters, saying they get tons of lifters returned for like LS-DOD engines, and there's nothing wrong with the lifters. Like the customers that were returning them had an oil pressure, oil control problem someplace else in their engines. So that's why now they are putting a video out, because it's becoming a nuisance to them that to let people know that, hey, there is nothing wrong with this lifter. Something else is wrong with your engine. So that's why these people make the instructions, make the videos to help us all out. You don't want to, I just said it before and I'm going to say it again. Like, people will come in here and ask me, well, what's the specification for that? And what's that? And what's that? And just because I can't rattle them all off of my head, I don't feel bad about that. That's what reference materials is for. You don't have to be so cocky knowing I know every spec, every pin out, and everything else where I don't need the instructions. The instructions are there for a reason. So use them. And if you have any further questions, drop them down in the comment section. I'll try to reply to them as much as we can. The channel's growing. I thank you guys for all watching the videos, commenting, liking, subscribing. Please continue to do so. We got a lot of great things coming around the horizon. And thank you. Remember, if you want any help with your vehicles and you want to hire us, we are here at the shop Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Our phone number is 313-264-1689. And hopefully you can be a customer of ours and we can take care of you. White One Auto, out.